What if, in the span of just one single day, a decades-long rivalry, simmering for ages, just exploded? An all-out direct conflict, changing, the entire geopolitical landscape overnight. What if that actually happened just last week? Here on The Deep Dive, our mission is really to cut through all the noise, the headlines, and unravel the dramatic events that unfolded on Friday, June 13th. And crucially, what they mean for the future. We've dug into detailed reports, analyses of the situation, to offer you a rare look behind those headlines, to try and grasp what really transpired.
And it's important to ground this immediately in the stark reality. On that Friday, June 13th, we saw coordinated military strikes, pretty sophisticated covert operations, and then a massive, truly unexpected retaliation. Military analysts, they're not mincing words here. They're calling this a full-scale war, not just, skirmishes or incidents. The whole global landscape really shifted dramatically in less than 24 hours.
Okay, so to really get a sense of the scale of Friday's events, let's set the scene. Early hours, June 13th. The world wakes up to pretty astonishing news. More than 200 fighter jets, coming from Israel, traveled about 1,500 kilometers, that's roughly 930 miles for our U.S. listeners, deep towards Iran. Striking strategic targets, destroying facilities. I mean, it was a bold move, right? Pretty unprecedented for Israel, which usually avoids such direct, large-scale stuff.
Exactly. And that wasn't even the full picture of the initial assault. Simultaneously, Israel's Mossad, their intelligence agency, executed these highly sophisticated assassination operations inside Iran. And these weren't random targets either. Intelligence indicates they were focused on important military leaders, key scientists, researchers involved in Iran's nuclear energy development, the speed, the precision. It all suggested, a deep level of preparation, embedded intelligence. Really quite something. But then what followed on the night of the very same day was, well, maybe even more stunning. Iran retaliated. Over 500 ballistic missiles aimed right at Tel Aviv, plus hundreds of drones.
500 missiles.
Yeah.
That's just staggering.
It is. And the scale of the damage in Israel, reports are calling it unprecedented. Nothing like it since the state was established back in 1948. And now, as we're recording this, both sides are still striking each other. It's clearly a new, much more dangerous phase in this whole conflict.
So given these, incredibly dramatic events, you have to ask, did this just erupt overnight? Or were there deeper things going on, historical currents? What's the background here? What led to such, animosity between Iran and Israel? We have to go back. Right, back to 1979 after the Iranian Revolution?
That's exactly right. Yeah, 1979 is the pivot point. From the Iranian perspective, the new regime that took over, they saw Israel and the U.S. as basically allies of the old system they just overthrew. So they viewed the American and Israeli military presence in the region as a direct threat to their national security. Iran felt, kind of exposed. They didn't have strong alliances then. So to secure themselves, they adopted this two-pronged strategy. First, expand their regional influence, supporting armed groups. We hear about them all the time, the axis of resistance, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen.
Right, the proxies.
Exactly. But it wasn't just ideology. It was really about securing their borders, gaining political influence across the Middle East. And second, while the new Iranian regime was ambitious, they actively pursued nuclear weapons. They saw it as crucial for asserting power globally for their long-term security.
Okay, and this is where Israel's position becomes so critical. Israel itself has, though unofficially, nuclear weapons, right? Estimates are around 90 warheads. So naturally, they are vehemently opposed to anyone else in the region getting them, especially Iran. They see an Iranian bomb not just as a threat, but as an existential one. Our analysis shows since '79, Iran has been Israel's #1 enemy, even more so than some Arab states. So stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons, that's been their absolute top priority for decades.
Absolutely. And that Israeli concern, of course, translates into huge pressure internationally, especially on the U.S. For more than 20 years, American presidents, feeling that pressure from Israel, have slapped sanction after sanction on Iran, all aimed at stopping that nuclear program. It's been this long, drawn-out, high-stakes game.
A game that did seem to have a moment of maybe de-escalation. The 2015 Lausanne nuclear agreement, the JCPOA under President Obama. What were the terms there? Remind us.
Yeah, the JCPOA, that was seen as a big deal at the time. The terms were pretty straightforward. Sanctions get lifted. In return, Iran had to drastically reduce its stockpile of enriched uranium, keep it way below weapons grade levels, and, crucially, led international inspectors, the IAEA, into their nuclear sites for regular checks.
So monitoring was key.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the U.S. and Iran. China, Britain, Germany, Russia, France, they were all part of it. It really felt like a major diplomatic win for the Obama administration back then.
Okay, so that 2015 agreement offered a potential off-ramp, a period of calm. How did that unravel?
Yeah.
Specifically, what happened when President Trump pulled the U.S. out in 2018 and put sanctions back on?
Well, that withdrawal just completely changed the game. Iran, feeling like the deal was broken, basically used it as an excuse, you could say. They quickly restarted their covert nuclear work. And here's a really critical detail that came out later. They successfully enriched uranium up to 60%.
60%. And weapons grade is around 90%, right? So really close.
Very close. Dangerously close. President Biden tried to get negotiations going again, but it largely failed. And even President Trump, back in office in early 2025, he renewed the pressure. 5 rounds of talks with Iran, all unsuccessful. Just a complete deadlock.
And leading up to this attack, we heard Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly talking about a new Holocaust, really framing this as an existential threat to Israelis. Not just policy, but survival.
Yes, the rhetoric was extremely heightened. Framing it in those terms signals the perceived gravity of the situation from Israel's perspective.
Which brings us right back to that key question. Why now? Why did Netanyahu choose this specific moment for such a massive attack? Was it some new intel?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And it's important to be clear. Israel knew about Iran reaching 60% enrichment for, 3 or 4 years. The latest IAEA report wasn't sudden breaking news that forced their hand. The real trigger, it seems, was a shift in the regional power balance. Iran's allies, that axis of resistance we talked about, they were significantly weakened. Well, look at the specifics. The Syrian regime, a key ally, is much weaker than it used to be. Hezbollah got hit hard by those pager attacks, recently exploding pagers, walkie-talkies disrupting their communications massively. The Houthis in Yemen, they'd been under sustained U.S. strikes for 3 months. And Hamas, well, obviously exhausted by the ongoing conflict there. All this together kind of exposed Iran's flank, its back, you could say. It created what looked like a perfect window, maybe a unique window, to strike.
And then there's Netanyahu's situation at home. Reports show he's deeply unpopular, facing criminal charges, losing political ground. So was this attack maybe a golden opportunity for him, as some analysts suggest? A chance for a big win, distract from domestic problems, maybe rally support from the U.S. and Europe who'd been keeping some distance?
It certainly looks like domestic political calculations were a major factor, a sort of gamble, perhaps, to change the narrative and shore up his own position.
Okay, let's get into the specifics of the Israeli attack itself. You mentioned it started from within Iran.
Yes, and this is quite extraordinary. The operation didn't just rely on jets flying in. It seems it critically depended on intelligence penetration inside Iran. Reports indicate a large network, maybe over 1,500 Israeli agents, who had been living there among Iranians, totally undetected for quite some time.
1,500 agents. Embedded.
That's what the analysis suggests. And these agents were vital. They apparently managed to disable or jam Iranian radar and air defense systems from the inside out, basically blinding them right before the strike. Then the 200 Israeli jets came in, launching around 330 projectiles.
And the targets, you mentioned strategic facilities.
Key targets, yes.
Yeah.
The Natanz nuclear reactor, that's their main enrichment site. And remember, Natanz is deep underground, like 80 to 100 meters, with thousands of centrifuges and a lot of their enriched uranium. They also hit the Iraq heavy water reactor, 3 other suspected enrichment plants, the Iranian Armed Forces HQ, the Revolutionary Guard HQ, Tabriz Airport, military bases, missile depots, and controversially, reports indicate some residential areas were hit as well.
Wow. And the assassinations.
Also facilitated by those agents on the ground, high-ranking officials, the chief of staff, the Revolutionary Guard commander, plus about 10 key nuclear scientists and experts, people vital to their program. And the precision. Hitting specific apartments. Analysts stress this wasn't some sci-fi tech. It was down to detailed, on-the-ground human intelligence guiding those missiles. For Iran's intelligence services, this whole thing was, frankly, a huge embarrassment. A scandal and disaster, as some reports put it.
Okay, so Israel pulls off this incredibly complex, seemingly devastating strike. They must have felt pretty confident, expecting maybe a limited, weak response from Iran, right? Assuming Iran was too hurt, too exposed.
That certainly seems to have been the calculation. They expected Iran to be significantly debilitated.
But they were dead wrong.
Completely wrong. Iran's response was really unexpected in its scale and power. Same day, Friday night, June 13th, over 500 missiles launched. Not just one volley. 6 or more waves striking all through the night. And they kept launching missiles for 3 straight days after that, vowing to launch over 2,000 more eventually.
And their strategy. Drones first, then missiles.
Exactly. A smart tactic. Hundreds of drones sent first, specifically to overwhelm and distract Israel's air defenses, the Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow, Patriot systems. And right behind the drones came the ballistic and hypersonic missiles aimed at the actual targets while the defenses were busy.
And what were those targets inside Israel? Just military?
No, far from it. They hit the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Economy, the financial center in Tel Aviv, major air bases like Tel Aviv and Nevatim, intelligence HQs, the Weizmann Institute of Science, but also dozens of cities and residential communities. The destruction, especially in Tel Aviv, was described as unprecedented. Hundreds of homes, buildings just flattened, scenes Israelis hadn't seen since 1948.
It's hard to even picture that. Millions of people, including the Prime Minister, huddled in shelters for days. The country just paralyzed.
Yes, the human impact, even with relatively low casualties initially, was immense.
Why were the casualties relatively low given that scale of attack?
Primarily because of Israel's extensive network of concrete shelters, or mamads. Over 3 million Israelis, including Netanyahu, took refuge there. Many stayed in shelters for days afterwards, which meant, everything shut down. No work, no school, businesses closed, banks, stock market. Streets were empty. This shelter system saved lives, undoubtedly, but the disruption was total.
Okay, let's step back and try to assess this.
Yeah.
After all this, who actually came out ahead? Who lost? If we look at Israel's goals, did they achieve them?
Well, let's break it down. Goal 1, destroy Iran's nuclear project, or at least force them back to negotiations. Result, seems like a failure. They hit some surface facilities, sure, but the really critical stuff, like Natanz, deep underground, apparently untouched. Iran still has its enriched uranium, and paradoxically, some analysts think this might just push Iran to get a weapon faster now, feeling even more threatened.
So goal 1, largely missed. What about goal 2? Score a public victory, rally support at home and abroad.
That also seems to have backfired. Iran's surprisingly strong response completely undermined any narrative of a quick, decisive Israeli victory. Netanyahu might actually look weaker now, not stronger. And seeing images of Israeli settlers under rubble, that was a shock to the Israeli public, a visual usually associated with their neighbors.
And the third goal, inciting the Iranian people against their own regime.
That's still unclear, really, but initial signs suggest the opposite might be happening. Reports indicate the Iranian opposition is actually rallying with the government, united by anger over the Israeli strikes. Nationalism is a powerful force.
So despite the intelligence coup, the assassinations, the physical damage, Iran seems to have weathered the storm strategically, maybe even gained something.
It appears so in some crucial ways. They achieved 2 really significant things, despite the intel breach. First, they proved their missile capability is real and potent. Getting hundreds of missiles through Israel's multi-billion-dollar, 4-layered air defense system to hit Tel Aviv, that sent a powerful message. It's a huge demonstration.
Right, that they can reach deep into Israel.
Exactly. And second, they showed they can fight Israel directly. For years, the narrative was Iran hides behind its proxies. This direct, intense retaliation challenges that. They showed they can deliver serious punches themselves.
So this leaves us in a really precarious place. Where do we go from here? This situation feels incredibly volatile. Global stakes are sky-high oil prices, alliances, everything.
Well, analysts are sketching out 2 main possibilities, broadly speaking. Possibility 1, Iran decides, okay, let's negotiate. They talk with President Trump, with Israel, maybe agree to significant limits on their nuclear program.
And the other path.
Possibility 2. Iran says no deal. They refuse to negotiate under pressure and double down, maybe even race towards developing a nuclear weapon openly. And that path? Well, many analysts warn that could be the one that triggers a much wider conflict, maybe even World War III, given how many powers could get drawn in.
And the international reaction is already ramping up, isn't it?
Absolutely. It seems Israel isn't prepared to just wait another decade or so. The pressure is on. We're seeing Russia's President Putin offering to mediate, trying to prevent more chaos, maybe gain influence. Pakistan has come out strongly supporting Iran, beefing up security around its own nuclear sites. And you have to assume China won't just sit on the sidelines if things escalate further. They have huge interests in the region.
It really feels like we're on a knife's edge. In a world just flooded with information, constant updates, events moving so fast, trying to understand the why behind these headlines feels more critical than ever. So for you listening, as this unprecedented situation keeps developing, what new layers of understanding will you be looking for in the days ahead? What questions will you be asking?